Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John.
Jeremy.
Welcome, folks, and I guess our first full week into 2020. Jeremy, have you seen any weird future signs or signs of the future?
No, unless you count no, I guess not. It's just people driving really stupid on the highway again. But I guess that happened last decade too. So
There we
anyway,
go.
so
Until we get the flying cars.
yeah,
I guess we can talk about 2020 Olympics and karate going to it, but this is me doing a shoulder shrug that no one in our audience can see. I think it's a good thing. It's a positive thing that karate is now a part of the 2020 Olympics, but it's a step in the right direction. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, maybe I guess we'll see. So
It doesn't really go into a lot of what we're after in terms of just training, of doing old school training. You see Jeremy looking back at his pictures of all the old guys, and they would not be. Maybe they would be happy that karate is in the Olympics, but
maybe I don't know. I mean, probably some of them would be. I mean, it's something to be proud of. So hey,
cool. Now, Jeremy, what have you been working on this week?
just trying to keep my head above water. That's about it. So, I mean, it's just been a very, very hectic week. So, between work, family issues, as far as training's going, worked with Cy a little bit this week, just to kind of get going on that, along with some Nachi showed on and Tamari stays on back to basics and stuff. And so,
Those are always good things to go back to, especially as the new year gets on. I just worked on Psy. I told a friend of ours and just kind of jazz Psy.
so
As in terms of, I didn't want to do one kata, so I know like the 2.5 Psy kata that I know. I just kind of took pieces of it and just started doing it on a eight corners formation and just kind of went from there and stopped at about 20 minutes. Everyone can see it on YouTube now. So
very cool. Very cool.
So going back to our topic of the Olympics, this can kind of be a nice segue into getting into our main topic. Essentially, some of the criticism that's come of the Olympic karate has been that it's all sport. It's very focused on the tournament style of karate, and for a lot of people that isn't karate, and a lot of people don't think that's the right karate. It's not quote unquote traditional. So today we're going to get into exactly that, tradition. I guess we can maybe sing this song from Fiddler on the Roof.
No.
Copyright strike.
No, no. I kind of go with Al Bundy's philosophy of singing. You can't sing well, sing loud. So nobody wants to hear that.
So there's a disparity between traditional karate and sport karate. And though I think a lot of people would want us to get into that tonight, instead, we are going to get into what traditions are and what traditions we encounter a lot in karate. And we might spread this topic over 1 or 2 weeks. We're not entirely sure, but we're going to get into it today. And just starting with, what the heck is a tradition?
So basically, a tradition is something that's been made up somewhere along the line. Bottom line, whether it's cultural, whether it's in-house, whether it's perception, it's something somewhere has been made up, passed on, and someone has basically thought that as they're passing it on, it has some value. Add on or correct me if I'm going off the wrong way. So
I believe that's correct. I believe that's correct. There is no natural tradition, as it were, in any sort of form of martial arts, rather than just don't get hit in the face. Probably the most natural tradition in martial arts itself. With karate, there's obvious cultural roots and heritage that goes along with that. And for many who've practiced karate, the interesting part of that has been disseminating the culture that martial arts come from, or that country, that nationality, those people that martial art generally comes from, into kind of the broader world. And that has been, to me, I think, karate's strength and weakness, because karate, unlike, we can always say, any martial art was kind of an amalgam of a bunch of people coming together and figuring something out, figuring out how to defend themselves and which is the best way to defend themselves. Karate's got this through just being an amalgam of what was in Okinawa, what came down from Japan, what was being brought over from China, and anywhere mixed in between. So karate's got an interesting tradition, I think probably before it became really solidified, of figuring out whoever was coming to Okinawa at the time who had some valuable information, shared it, and people integrated it and understood it as they were, as I think anywhere else. Basically, folks, it's not natural. So I guess don't think that it is or isn't, but that's any tradition, I think.
Right. I mean, and you can basically implement any tradition that you really want. I mean, there's different studies that have been done that you can actually force certain things to be traditions if you really want to. Yeah, I mean, it can become a learned behavior, and therefore, oh, this is the way we've done it, and this is the way it's always going to be done. Well, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. And sometimes I think from those traditions, sometimes I don't think we look at things completely from an open-mindedness and are stuck in that mode.
Right. And I think people say this is tradition that goes back XYZ number of years. Think about it in any real terms. How far back does a karate tradition go? I think the earliest. I had the good fortune of going to the kind of brand spanking new Karate Kaikon last summer. It's the first official karate museum. It's very small. But they have a chart that goes back and trying to figure out who was the first person in Ryukyu who kind of says this was called T or Te. It goes back to maybe 1600 that first person kind of emerged that they can find any sort of record of. But that's what they have any sort of record of. Not necessarily, wherever he got his thing or who he taught or who he interacted with. Anyone who talks about tradition, they always talk about, time immemorial. However long that time immemorial really stands, 10, 20, 50, 100, 200, 400, 1,000 years.
Exactly. I mean, and sometimes it's, whatever day of class, you've got a new tradition. So, I mean, sometimes it can be made up that quick. So,
yeah. And I think that the kind of I guess I wouldn't say macro versus micro, but the micro tradition of, just what you do in your own class.
Yeah.
What you put out there, what students are made to do. They've done it long enough. They've done it more than 2 weeks. To them, that in some way, in some fashion, imparts a tradition. But I guess we can also, in that vein of talking about students and teachers, get into what traditions do we generally see when we talk about traditional karate? Why are they the way they are, and how important do we maybe value them? So I guess one we can get into is talking about entering the dojo. What do you think about that? So in terms of maybe just entering the dojo, walking into a school, traditions involved in that?
Well, I go back to whenever I first started, the very first time I walked into a dojo. It was very intimidating, but sometimes there's some type of mystique or some, I don't know, I guess a cloud of not knowing anything walking into somewhere where you're very uncomfortable. And I think that kind of starts everything off.
So we could almost always, I guess, at the start of any journey, there's always the cloud of unknowing.
It's interesting. I've been to many different dojos, many different styles, just to see what people are doing, how they do things and stuff. It's been everything from a very pleasant greeting to literally a confrontational meeting where as soon as you walk in the door, you better be ready to protect yourself because they're going to attack. That's kind of odd, but I mean, okay. I mean, I can appreciate that, see what you're going to work with, but at the same time, I guess that can be a tradition, how you even greet new people.
And there's what is it? There tends to be the sit in the back of class and watch tradition of you don't want new people to jump right in. There's
Right.
a lot of places that do that. There's a lot of people who have it. I think for safety reasons in the modern day, but I think also in the kind of not, there's the weird inclination from people who already done martial arts even for a month or so. Somebody new steps in, you don't want them stepping on the mat.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's in a real controlled environment. In other words, like a one-on-one kind of deal.
Or you got a really small class.
Yeah, yeah. And even then, I think one-on-ones. I've always thought it was better, but somebody else probably got a different opinion. That's cool. I mean, I've got a buddy of mine. He teaches a very traditional, very old style of not EI. It's actually Katori, uh, sword drawing. He makes them sit usually at least 5 to 10 classes before they even begin. It's like, is this really what you want to do? Because I'm not going to waste my time.
It depends on what school it is. Does it feel like in the kind of the Koryu or the older weapon styles, they definitely do that. I know I saw it in a Kenjutsu class. Just sat there for 4 hours just watching people do it
Yeah.
before I was even allowed to kind of walk on the mat. There's merits to that because that is exactly what you want from people. You want people to kind of demonstrate patience or some form of humbleness or deference to what you're doing before you just let them on and yabble dabble.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, if you want people to train, then maybe you need to meet them in some halfway. And so whether or not you're losing something in doing that, I think that there's a lot to be said for people who still hold to that tradition of you come to this school, you see what we do. You either accept it or you don't.
Yeah. And I think that tends to go more on style systems, different arts that are, I don't know if a little more dangerous, a little more risk, or more mentally challenging. Because I've experienced that with one of the meditation arts. I went and took qigong for a little bit, just to change, just as a change of pace, not to learn something like no touch knockouts or anything like that. I just wanted something to change up.
Qigong, I don't think there's any real Qigong person who believes in that, but
Yeah, well, I know I haven't found any, but anyway, so I'm not saying there's anybody out there. I'm just whatever. But I know when I went in, the guy was like, "Look, I don't know you, and I want you to watch at least 2 classes to make sure this is what you want, because most people don't just walk in here wanting just this." And so I was like, "All right, that's cool." Yeah, it was really really insightful on a lot of aspects of my overall training. I mean, so I was thankful for it, and I still practice it some today. So he wanted to make sure that that's what I wanted, and make sure I wasn't wasting my time or my money, and didn't waste his time. So I can appreciate that.
you're talking about something only an adult would be able to do, not
Yeah,
like what a kid could be able to do. It's
yeah,
with kids, it's almost like you want to put them out there almost immediately and
yeah.
have them start doing stuff, and for completely different reasons.
Right. Sometimes the same reasons, but yeah, definitely, yeah. Because I mean, kids have got the energy and sometimes the attention span of a gnat too. So I mean, just speaking from experience, I mean, I love my kiddos, but just sometimes, oh, I want to do this, oh, I want to do that, and it's like, and it changes every 30 seconds. So it's like, okay,
Well,
all right,
I mean, that is the difference between wanting a young child to have experiences and to kind of understand stuff about the world, as opposed to having a thoughtful choice,
yeah,
which kind of ultimately has to happen later on in life. You can't. A lot of people might say, he's too old to be training. Like, go home, grandpa. he's only like 10 years old or something like that. But there's a certain point of maturity where you can ask somebody to sit there, and that will test their maturity and hopefully help them mature more. And I think hugely beneficial to kind of the late childhood or early adolescence.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and the other thing is, I mean, once you get into dojo training center, whatever you want to call studio, you know, whatever fitness club down the road, YMCA or whatever, so there are also other things that go along with it. It's like one of the things one of my first instructors said was, when in doubt, bow. I'm like, why? And it's like, well, you're showing respect and you're showing humbleness throughout. When in doubt, bow. If it's wrong, somebody will correct you, and usually they'll take it a lot better than if you just go do something just willy nilly and, hey, I'll just think of this and just do it. No, maybe you shouldn't do that. So, I mean, there's different things around the training facility that are big no-nos. Like, one of the big ones I ran into was, there was a certain way my first instructor, Robbie, wanted to have weapons put up in the weapons racks.
Right.
And that was the day that was like the first month and a half I was there, and I pretty much passed out into the weapons racks and basically came down on top of me. He was less than thrilled about that, and we'll just leave it at that. And I was just happy to not pass out again and make it out the door, make it to another training session. So that's kind of how that went. But it was a good learning lesson for me. But different people have different ways around the training facility. Some of them are very strict on dress code, which we'll get into a little bit more. But some places aren't. And one of the things I tried to implement, which obviously since I've closed my school, it didn't go so great, but I thought it was a good idea. But, train in street clothes. And that's what you're in. That's what you're going to be doing. So, I mean, if you're in a gi, hakama, or whatever, you're not going to be in that when you're out into the world. It's not natural, and that's kind of how I always thought of it. So that was one of the traditions I kind of came up with my short-lived school, but that's okay. I mean, that's fine.
Well, and I think going back to the weapons thing, there's a reason for that tradition, and that's to show deference to something that could be possibly fatally harmful.
Yeah, I mean,
respect that.
Well, it was even, certain people go here, certain, it was like, it was almost, it was so regimented. It was like, this person steps up, this person puts the weapon on the rack, they step back, and then they turn and they go. And not until they're past you, then you go in, and it was in a separate room at the time, which, I can appreciate that now. I mean, it was just, the dumb things I did in life, and so I learned from it. Cool, okay, great.
Well, and there's something more to be said there, though. I mean, especially when we talk about karate and weapons racks. So karate doesn't have the coolness of like swords. I think a lot of people in karate really do kind of envy and wish karate would like pick up the sword, and kind of karate is almost the antithesis of that to a degree. Yeah. But when we get into Kobudo, which people conflate as something that is part of karate but isn't, conversation for a different day. But especially when we start to use weapons, we have to treat those weapons the same way we would treat a sword, the same way we would treat any other weapon in any other style.
Right.
And unfortunately, that etiquette towards those weapons for a lot of schools doesn't get taught very well. And so you end up having a lot of people just running up to weapons racks and grabbing whatever they want, and not being polite about it. And
yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, my deal was I knew I was getting ready to pass out, and I was just wanting to get the weapon out of my hand and on the rack, and
right.
Didn't work out so well, but that's okay. So, so I can laugh about it now. So
That's a different. That's something different entirely. But
yeah,
but that's doing the safety dance around the weapons. So,
yeah.
but going back to what you were, or pressing on to what you were talking about, gis and stuff like that, or uniforms, or what we wear in class. Why would we have any sort of specific dress code in a school or in training? Why does traditional training tend to have a dress code as opposed to, I don't know, MMA, or and our modern friends
Yeah.
tend to not.
I mean, my thought is, I mean, it is a way to instill some discipline into the class. It's like you show up this way, you show up, certain ways. I mean, I remember when I was training with Mr. Oyata, it was like, it's been so long. It's like I remember I'm sorry, it was like March to September, I believe. You wore white hakamas, and then from October until back to 1st of March, you wore black hakamas, and it was something like that. I maybe
Daylight savings.
yeah, kind of followed that, but it was just kind of what was expected of us, and that was cool. I mean, I wasn't thrilled about shelling out that much money for hakamas, but that's okay. I mean, it was. I mean, that was what was expected, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I mean, when we trained in weekly class, it was full uniform. There was no t-shirts or anything like that. It was, you were expected to wear full hakama during training. So, which, I mean, that was fine, except for there were a couple days in the summer that was a little brutal, but that's okay. I lived through it, so it's all good.
Well, and I think those. I mean, you go back to the history of the gi in a lot of ways, the history of the gi itself. I'm sure someone's going to say, well, no, it actually comes from blah, blah, blah. The real history of the gi would be gym. It was 1900s gym clothes, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, and I get that, but I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'll say this. I mean, my hakama is probably the most comfortable thing I have and ever put on. I mean, I could sleep in that thing and it's perfectly fine. I'm not going to, but I mean, it's just very, very comfortable. And yeah, I mean,
It's clothing.
huh?
It's clothing that's more or less loose enough to. And I think some people are going to get confused. So I guess maybe we need to take a side step to explain. When we say hakama, we don't mean Aikido hakama.
Right.
We don't mean Kendo hakama. We don't mean Aido hakama. We don't mean or Kyudo hakama. We mean Nobo hakama, which are like shorter version, or like the not so like parachute pants version, which is, I don't know if that's disrespectful or not, but the not so long or big baggy version of Japanese hakama. When we say hakama, if anybody would look up like Motoburyu or another, Okinawan Koryu, you'll see like a shorter version of those hakama. When we talk about hakama, that's what me and Jeremy, or me and Marty, or people who do kind of Mr. Eliot's version of karate. That's our gi, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the belt is attached and you wrap that around in a certain way. So similar to, I mean, I wouldn't say similar, but I mean, in somewhat of a similar way to your more formal skirt driven or skirt made hakama. So
Right. I mean, it's basically the same. It's just the rope around it tends to be a lot shorter.
yeah.
So you can't do the fancy thing that those other hakama do, where in the terms of the folding it and stuff like that, and the like 20 steps you have to do that. So
yeah.
We kind of have the I guess I've heard some people call them like the farmer version of hakama. So
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. So,
and I guess that's something, I guess showing our hand a little. That's our tradition. that's a tradition we come from.
Sure.
Even though we tend to not subvert it, but not thumb our nose at it, but don't take it with a grain of tend to take our tradition with a grain of salt. We still more or less hold to that tradition.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. I'd say pretty much, yes.
And I guess enough of that aside. I guess when we go to talk about gis, I think there's value in maintaining the gi and keeping in that tradition. It does go back. It re-roots. It's something I think a lot of people can still come around and be like, oh, we do karate. That's the thing we all wear for karate. It doesn't necessarily need to be the only thing we wear for karate or the only thing you can use when you train. But when you talk about formal settings or possibly coming to big meetings or things like that, I think there's value in it, but it isn't necessary.
Yeah, I'd second that, definitely. One of the things that I've noticed, just kind of going around lately to some different schools, just for fun, just see what they're doing, is like some of them will do like if you attain a certain belt color, then you have to move up in different gi color or something like that. And
Right.
and for a while I was a part of a school that did that as well. And I mean, in some ways it did give you, I guess, while you're training and trying to learn new stuff, and it did give you, I guess, a motivational sense of accomplishment, but wasn't necessary. No, it was interesting.
I mean, there's one thing that some people like nostalgia freaks or something like that would say when they get hakama or they find gis from like older students or something like that, or older gis and stuff like that. They kind of have there's a sense of, wow, this person did the same thing I did, X number of years ago. Their training is kind of in the gi.
Yeah.
As not to make too much of that, but I think there is a certain sense of awe when it comes down to that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I mean, it was funny. I've got one of my old gis when I first started. I found it in a box that we were packing up when we were moving and stuff. It was interesting, like the rips and different things from when I picked up a pair of Kama and I accidentally sliced a little tear in the gi top and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that. And I mean, all of a sudden that memory came back. So it was kind of interesting. So
because it's opposed to wearing a hoodie and a pair of sweatpants.
Yeah.
But at the same, there tends to be a kind of a specialness with having a uniform associated with karate. And I think, it's the same thing, I think, as any sort of like football or any other sort of sport uniform, where you tend to take pride in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think especially the one that you use to train all the time in to get to a certain point where you wanted to go before you bought that newer gi or hakama or whatever it was. I mean, yeah, absolutely. So
yeah, and I think that it's someone who, because I live in either on a tiny island where it's either just okay and nice, or it's bloody hot and air conditioner only is on one floor and air only really goes one way. I tend to just train in pants and that's about it. When I'm doing my dailies, and there is that sense where it's like, wow, if I was in a dojo, there would be a much different. There's a much different sense of when you have your gi on and train with other people, or when you have your uniform on and train with other people, as opposed to just being in a room by yourself and training. Though I think both are necessary. I think it's a good thing they've stuck around till today. Whether or not, our criticism of the belt system or whatnot is merited or anything like that, that's another thing entirely. But so, I mean, we can talk about a little bit about etiquette and then get into belts. We've kind of covered a lot when you go into a school, when you go out of school, and I think you really hit it on the head really well, Jeremy, when saying, when in doubt, bow.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to when you go in somewhere that you're not familiar with, definitely be humble. I mean, gee, many Christmas, because usually if you're not humble, somebody's going to be there to humble you, and you're not going to like it too well.
Right.
And it usually doesn't come out. And I've been a part of multiple schools that have done that, and it never turns out real nice. I've always thought, hey, look, kind of act quiet, act dumb, just kind of okay, whatever, and just kind of get the lay of the land and see what's going on. Because different places are different. Some will be very strict when you bow. When you bow in on the floor, off the floor. Don't bow in on the floor. You just walk in. A lot of different, I guess, philosophies between different schools. I mean,
And no one is more correct than the other. I mean, a bow is merely a sign of respect.
right, and I think a lot of etiquette is more if you're doing it the same way every single time.
Consistency.
Consistency, yes, because I remember it was very interesting with my first instructor, Robbie. I mean, it was when I first started, it was very, very, very strict on exactly when to bow, when to do this, when to do that, the order of it, all that kind of stuff. Boom. And then after a while, there were a couple things that ended up happening that he wanted to change things up. It wasn't quite so. It was still very, very formal, but it wasn't quite as formal as it was before, if that makes sense. Like,
And I think that might be that's just a change in the person.
yeah, I mean, because like when I first started, we always did a seiza bow to bow into class and to bow out of class every time.
Right. Which is not unheard of for karate school, but it's not even with some more. I don't want to say not modern, but there's some more formal Japanese schools like Kyudo that isn't necessary with every practice.
And that changed over time, and that was fine. I mean, and it got to a point where, after we'd bow in, we would sit there and recite the Dojo Kun and the guiding principles before we even started practice, before we even started doing it. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it was ingrained in us that, getting your mind straight was a lot more important than any physical accomplishment that you'd ever do. There's a lot of value to that.
And what do you think changed that tradition over time with your first teacher?
There was an incident that happened, and I don't want to really get into it, so
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, once that happened, I think he took a step back and said, okay, what's important, what's not. This is what we're going to change, and this is what we're going to leave the same. Reciting Dojo Kun guiding principles at the beginning of class, that always stayed the same. I mean, that was a given, and that was cool. But yeah, I mean, just how we did certain things changed a little bit, but I mean, it was fun. But I mean, different schools are different. I mean, you've been a part of school. I know you've been a part of schools that if someone that has a Dan rank walks in the door, you stop everything and you bow to them. I mean, that's a tradition of etiquette, but
A tradition of etiquette, yes.
It is a tradition of etiquette in that setting. We'll just leave it there. I mean, in some ways that was kind of nice, but in other ways, I hate to say this, but whenever I was a part of that organization, if you ever noticed, I'd always try to be the first one on the floor, so I always felt guilty when people would stop training and then bow to me. I always felt like, don't do that. Keep training, doggone it. But I understood the importance of the recognition and the respect to people and all. I got that, but I just always felt bad whenever I'd walk in and then somebody had to stop training, and then I'm like, no, I never felt like, don't bow to me. I'm like,
There's some precedent for it. So especially when I've worked in Japanese public schools and stuff like that, when there's kids doing their sports, where it's like baseball, basketball, uh, volleyball, tennis. If I would have ever to walk by, or if any adult is ever to walk by, those kids generally stop and at least greet you. They don't go the whole 9 yards of kind of what you just referred to, which maybe was a little on the extreme. But there's at least some recognition of the adult or the teacher walking by. So I think there's some precedent to that in the culture which that etiquette comes from.
yeah, yeah,
But to the degree which you're talking about, yeah, I 100% agree with you.
yeah. I mean, in some formal instances, I can see the merits of it, but for the most part, I thought that was a little over the top. I always did, but that's okay.
Over the top. Good arm wrestling movie for anybody for anybody looking for a good movie to watch on a Sunday.
Well, that's a classic '80s reference there. Okay, all right, that's showing my age. All right.
Hey, this is the best. Hey, what is the best? All right, let's get off topic. But what's the best canon movie? That movie. That movie is the best canon movie. That's one of the best Stallone action movies of all time.
I don't know. First Blood, the first one was better, but that's me. But
rather than the new one where he's like, "Don't go to Mexico," but
yeah, no, he should stop. But no, the very first one.
I started this cul-de-sac. I'm ending it. Damn it.
Sorry. All right. Okay, we're back.
So I guess one thing we can maybe close on in this, and kind of this will probably lead into our next podcast about this topic, because this topic is huge, and even just where we went today, we can go a little farther. Is we'll talk about the thing that gets everybody angry when they see the title of this podcast, belts.
Yeah.
Briefly touch on this.
I guess I'll start. I mean, belts. I mean, yeah. If you're running a school and you're trying to measure accomplishments and things like that, or measure skill level, things like that. I mean, that's definitely one way to do it. But
right.
It a lot of. I won't get into it just yet, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing I got to say about it is that this is something that was initially seen as a cool idea based on what Jiro Kano, the founder of modern judo, saw from a swimming competition, and then adopted that and put that into a rank system. And people wanted to use it as a motivator, and it might work in some instances as that, but in a lot of cases it tends to work as more as a kind of a measuring contest for a lot of people than anything else. And in a lot of ways, the belt itself is a part of the gi. That's just that. You have a gi, you have a belt because you need to hold it. When you put the gi top on, you hold it together using the belt, which has its own tradition of if your gi is like flapping around or whatever, you have to turn around and retuck everything in.
Yeah, yeah, it does help to have a belt with your gi. I mean, it's
how our tradition gets around all this, though, by having a hakama, where we tuck in our gi into the hakama, and that's the end, and that's all she wrote. So.
One of the things that I mean, different schools have different systems. I mean, it seems like the standard colors seem to be white, yellow, orange, purple, blue, green, brown, and then black.
Yeah.
I mean. And not necessarily in that order. I mean, different places swap green with purple or blue with this or whatever.
I got super confused when I switched schools once or twice when it was like blue. I remember it was like blue and purple got blue. Purple tends to always be the one right before brown, but then green tends to mean you're in the middle, and then orange or yellow or some. somebody out there has tried, and I believe failed to see where the color spectrum is going to degrade into black, essentially. Yeah. So
yeah, I wouldn't want to smell that belt, but that's beside the point. Yeah, but I remember Robbie tried this one idea in which basically instead of having all these different colors, we had 3 belt colors and we just had stripes on each one of them. And I mean, it was like white, green, and brown, and then black. Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was a good thing. In other ways, it kind of irritated people more than what he was trying to accomplish. And
what was he reversing long-standing like white to black multicolor belt system?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was just trying to get it to where it was like, okay, white was beginner, green was intermediate, brown was advanced, and then your Don ranks. I mean, it was just, and he structured the classes, beginner, intermediate, advanced. I mean, if you had this color belt, you went here. You had this color belt, you went there. And I mean, in some ways, it cut down a lot of arguments and things like that. Can I go to this class? Can I not go to this class? And, things like that. And I think he wanted to nip that in the bud. I think it caused some headaches because some people, I don't think, got the whole difference in just going to 3 different colors. So,
well, especially if you're talking about kids, it tends to the kids tend to. This is the whole problem with this, is that people try to capitalize. And we're going to get into this. This is going to roll over into next week. But yes, there's the belt rank system and all that stuff, and the issues and whatever with it. But the real issues that come out of this is not the belt system itself necessarily, but the capitalization on it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, getting into, not getting completely into that, but when you have somebody come in from another school and they come in and say, well, yeah, I'm a blue belt. Well, what the heck is that? I mean, what is that? What is your skill level? And it got to the point when I was training with Mr. Miner. He wouldn't, if somebody came in from a different style, he wouldn't ask what belt, or if they'd come in and introduce themselves. Yeah, I'm a orange belt and so. I'm like, okay, how many years have you trained? I mean, that's the first thing he'd ask. How many years have you trained?
Right.
I think in some ways, since it isn't standard, it does cause some confusion. But I mean, the capitalization and stuff, we'll get into that next week. I think that's a great topic to start really cranking on next week. But I think that's one of the traditions, I think, in a lot of schools, that it hurts, especially when you go somewhere else.
Right, and I think you get people who, when they move schools, and when we talk move schools, we talk about just regular folk, people who aren't really too focused on martial arts and not really have a large finger on the pulse of it. They take their kid out of one school and they put them in another, and they don't really see the difference between the two.
Well, or maybe their parents. I mean, we ran into this a lot, where parents, they were living somewhere else and they got a new job somewhere else, and they're just trying to get their kids, back into a school of some sort. What do you teach? They're trying to figure it out too. So
yeah, but this is a topic. It's our first time where we can say to be continued.
Yeah, to be dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. So, but that'll cap us off for now. So, Jeremy, what are you working on this week?
I'm going to go back to working on Sai, Nanchi Shodan, and Tamara Saison. Those are the main things. And kind of after our discussion before the podcast, I may be working on AQ a little bit as well. So
Yeah, or as I like to call it now, broom.
yeah, yeah. Hey, it works.
Uh, which could double for an Nuntibo as well, but that's a different story.
Uh, you'll have to explain that one to me. Now it's going to be kind of tricky.
That would well. I'll just explain it right now. A Nuntibo and an Aku basically are unevenly weighted weapons. They're almost like spear weapons. Basically, an Nuntibo is a spear,
Yeah,
and essentially, a broom it has the same composition as that weight wise to a degree. So it makes it easy, especially indoors, to work on those weapons without necessarily having those weapons in the same way. Of course, without necessarily having the same exact weight that an Antibo or a Baku might have.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so I guess this week I'm working on broom again because I've got some broom katas that I wanted to kind of clean off, and the one broom kata that me and Jeremy had worked on that kind of went in one ear and out the other, unfortunately, with me. And then I worked on it with another teacher, Mr. Sinise, and then we worked on it hard for one hard summer day, and then went in one ear and out the other. And then I saw a video of an old master do it, and I was like, oh, now I remember. So I guess I kind of clicked on it. So that's just me.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening and liking, subscribing, all that good stuff. We still have the Sherry Joe, and we also have added the Australia brush fire fundraiser as well. And we may or may not do something for charity for that through Streamlabs, but that kind of depends if Streamlabs is going to let me do that. But that'll kind of more stuff in the works. But I'm signing off as John.
And Jeremy, have a good evening, day, and afternoon.
And don't forget to keep training.